biology lovers, welcome to Cell to System. In the previous lecture, we have learned about the sporogenesis process of angiosperms as their pre-fertilization process. In today's class, we will learn about the pollination, which is another pre-fertilization changes occurring in flowers of angiosperms and gymnosperms as well. So, without wasting any time, let's start with our topic. Pollination is the process of transfer of pollen grains from the anther of the androecium to the stigma of the gynoecium. So, here you can see this is the anther. When it dehisces, it looks like that. For example, if this is a dehisced anther, it looks like that. And what happens? The pollen grains, they come out to the air. So, it goes to the stigma of the pistil. So, this stamen, it has pollen grains which will go to the pistil of the stigma. Now, this is the process of pollination. During this process, it has two typical types of pollination is seen in flowering plants. Let's see that. Types of pollination. Self-pollination and cross-pollination. Self-pollination is a process in which the transfer of pollen grains occurs in the same plant, and in cross-pollination, the transfer of pollen grains occur in different plants. The self-pollination is also differentiated into two types. These are autogamy and geitonogamy. The cross-pollination, it doesn't have any differentiation, so it is also called xenogamy. Let's understand the different types of pollination with a diagram. This is the diagram of two plants of same species, but the pollination in cross-pollination system occurs between two plants but of the same species. But in case of autogamy and geitonogamy, the pollination will occur in the same plant. Now let's see what is the difference between autogamy and geitonogamy. Now, in case of autogamy, the pollen grains from the same flower goes to the stigma of that flower only. So, here the pollen grain, if these are the anther and this is the stigma, I am drawing this. this pollen grain will come to that stigma only for the same flower. If here autogamy is occurring, the stigma will have the pollen of the same flower. So here autogamy is the self-pollination process when pollen grains from the anther goes to the stigma of that flower. For example, autogamy Mirabilis, jalapa and opuntia. So now if this is autogamy, then what is geitonogamy? Here in the same plant, if it is the stigma, the pollen grain from this anther will come to that stigma. The same flower will not get any pollen grain from that flower. So the geitonogamy also occurs in the same plant as it is a self-pollination process, but the flower will receive the pollen grain from the distant flowers of that plant only. So coming to cross-pollination, before coming to cross-pollination, we need to understand the examples of geitonogamy. Maize is a good example. So now we need to understand the difference or advantages and disadvantages between self-pollination and cross-pollination. Starting with the advantages of both self-pollination and cross-pollination. As we have seen, in case of self-pollination, there is transfer of pollen grain from anther to the stigma of the same flower or in the same plant. So there is not much importance of agents. So we don't need agents. Self-pollination is independent of agents. Here we are not doing differentiation. So the this if this is the advantage of self pollination, this can't be the advantage of cross pollination. The advantage of self pollination will be the disadvantage of cross pollination. This is a simple trick. So next is it maintains the purity of characters. As here the parental plants in self-pollination, the characteristics of the parents are completely transferred to the offspring. So there is no mix up of characteristics there because there is no hybridization, there is no cross. In that situation, this character, if for example a plant is, in case of any plant, if that plant produces very good quality of fruit or very good quality of ripened fruit, so this character will be maintained from parents to the offspring in case of self pollination. But in case of cross pollination, as there is a cross in fertilization between two different plants of the same species, this character, a single character cannot be maintained properly. Next is the offspring are same as parents. There is no special device or structure needed to attract any other organism because they don't need any agent, because they don't need any agents. So these are four main and common advantages of self pollination. Now coming to the cross pollination. In case of cross pollination, it has different new characters, adaptability is very high. For example, if the cross occurs between two same species of plants, but their habitat is different. One plant, it is situated near the river bank, and the other one, it is situated in a more dry region of the same species, but it is in a comparatively dry region. So they, both of them, they will have some epigenetic regulations or some environmental effects to their genetic characters. So now these two plants, when they will have a cross between them, the offspring produced will be very much adaptable to both the environment or both the situation, in to some extent to drought condition and to some extent of watery condition or moist condition. So it will have a high adaptability. As there is a cross, the offspring will get some new characteristics compared to their parents. So now the offspring has some evolved characteristics. If any kind of stress occurs, that they are evolutionarily very significant. They will evolve easily. So evolution, high chance of evolution. Here, in case of cross pollination, the agents are required. Agents can be biotic and abiotic. So the plants always have a ecological relationship between biotic and abiotic agents related to the plant. So produces good ecological relationship between biotic with, here between word is wrong, with biotic and abiotic agents involved in the pollination. They are more resistant to diseases. High resistance to diseases. The yield, in case of crop plant, if cross pollination occurs, the yield is always high or moderate, but never low or very good. If it is very high or good, but it can be very low. Crops yield is very high or good. So you will never be deprived when there is a cross pollination in case of plants. Now let's understand both of them has some disadvantages. Pile up the disadvantages. Talking about disadvantages, the self-pollination also has some disadvantages as it has some advantages. In case of self-pollination, no emergence of new characters. So, if you don't have new characters, you are low adaptable to the evolution. Low rate of adaptability due to some continuous or consecutive self-pollination, a plant experiences low quality of the good characters. If you are doing self-pollination for several generations for a plant, if it is ripened fruit is very tasty, or if the pod is very good, if the flower is very good, for any specific characteristics, a plant is self pollinated for several generations, it experiences low quality of that specific character or low quality of that race. So here, during several self pollinations in a plant, it experiences low quality of a race. Self pollination is evolutionarily is very not good. It is not. Immunity in case of self pollinated plants is very much decreased. Immunity to diseases is decreased. Talking about the cross pollination, the first thing we see is it is dependent upon agents. If no insect, no bird, or if it is any agent required to the plant, if that agent doesn't come, the plant will not experience any kind of pollination or fertilization. So it will be very bad or characteristics or very bad situation for the plant. The purity of the race is lost. Again, the plants require to produce a high amount of pollen grains because it is dependent upon agents and it is very uncertain process, so it requires to make a large amount of pollen grains. Wastage of pollen grains also occur. So now we have studied or we have discussed the advantages and disadvantages of self-pollination and cross-pollination as well. Based on types of pollinators or agents, cross-pollination can also be classified into three types. So here are anemophily, hydrophily, and zoophily. Anemophily is the pollination by wind. Hydrophily is the pollination by water, and zoophily is the pollination by animals. So the agents are different in three types, as well as the characteristics are also different. Both anemophily and hydrophily, they have some similar characteristics. For example, in case of anemophily, the flowers are colorless, odorless, and small. In case of pollinator, the nectar is required. The type of pollinator that requires nectar gland or the sweet smell of a flower is zoophily. In case of zoophily, but in case of wind is a abiotic factor, so it doesn't need any kind of attracting agents. So the pollen grains are very lightweight and feathery. The pollen grains are very lightweight and feathery. Production of pollen is very high, because when it is going far in a wind, it may be wasted. So that's why the plant produces a large amount of pollen grains. Another thing, no nectar gland. That's why it is odorless. The stigma, it has bristles. Stigma has some bristles which will catch the coming pollen grain in the wind current. If any wind current that blows over the stigma, the bristle of the stigma will catch that pollen grain. Talking about the pollination by water or the hydrophily, the characteristics that are present are: flowers are small, colorless, and odorless as well. Pollen grains are very lightweight, light in weight, the anther dehisces to the anther dehisces violently to a very considerable distance. To a very considerable distance. No nectar gland, and the pollen grains produced are very large in amount. Now, if we talk about pollination by animals or zoophily, the flowers are very bright and different color. And they are very large. Nectar gland is present. The pollen grains are sweet in taste, and the stigma is sticky. So, so we have discussed the types and characteristics. Now we will discuss the examples. In anemophily, paddy, wheat, and grass is involved. In case of hydrophily, hydrilla and Vallisneria. In case of zoophily, like Rafflesia, Crotalaria, and so on. Now we will come up with the types of zoophily. Now, entomophily is the pollination by insects. Anthrophily is the pollination by humans. Ornithophily is the pollination by birds. Myrmecophily is the pollination by ants. Phalaenophily is the pollination by moths. Chiropterophily is the pollination by bats. Hymenophily is the pollination by bees. Malacophily is the pollination by snail. Schizophily is the pollination by butterflies. And cantherophily is the pollination by beetles. See, pile up one example of each. Here, entomophily is sunflower, cucumber. The next is anthrophily, which is pollination by humans. It is seen in coconut. Next is ornithophily. Pia. Next, myrmecophily, that is pollination by ants and citrus. Phily, and it is seen as Nicotiana, tabacum, or Nicotiana species. Let me know in the comment section what is the common name of Nicotiana. It is very easy. It is pollination by bats and seen in banana plant. In hymenophily is the pollination apple plant. Malacophily is the pollination by Ella plant and Zostera plant. Next, Zoophylle. It is the pollination by seen in milkweed plant. Cantherophily is the pollination by beetles and it is seen in magnolia and water lily. We have discussed different types of zoophily along with their examples. In the next part, I am going to discuss about the various adaptations adapted by the plants to prefer self-pollination or cross-pollination. The four main adaptation of self-pollination are: first is bisexuality. Bisexuality. Bisexuality means presence of both male and female sexual organs in the same plant. Male and female sexual organs in the same flower. For example, Mirabilis and Opuntia. Mirabilis and Opuntia. Next is Clistogamy. Clistogamy is seen in flowers in which the flower doesn't open until the pollination occurs. Or flower remains closed, we can write, remains closed until the pollination occur. Seen in Commelina. Here, the male and female sexual parts mature at the same time. For example, Argemone and Ixora. The next is bud pollination. Here, pollination occurs in bud condition. Pollination occurs in bud condition. Bud pollination, actually the type of cleistogamy, it can, in some books you can find that there is no bud pollination or cleistogamy is seen, but the thing is different. Bud means the immature flower part or floral part, but in case of cleistogamy, the flower, all the organs get matures, but still the flower will not open or remain closed until the pollination occurs to ensure the self pollination. Next, we will start with various adaptations of cross pollination. Cross pollination, the first adaptation that is seen is unisexuality or dicliny. It is the presence of male and female sexual parts in two different flowers to ensure cross pollination. Example is croton dichogamy. This is the opposite to homogamy. In homogamy, both the parts are maturing at the same time. Here in dichogamy, the male and female parts are getting matured in different time lapse. And protogyny. Androecium matures before gynoecium. Example is hibiscus, which is China rose. Another one is protogyny. It is the gynoecium mature before androecium. For example, fig, magnolia. Next is Harcogamy is defined as the adaptive barrier between male and female reproductive part of plants to ensure cross pollination. The example is iris plant, gloriosa. Next is heteromorphism. Heteromorphism is the different in structure. The structural differences in male and female reproductive parts ensure cross pollination, preventing self pollination. Either the anther will be very long than the stigma, or the stigma or the style is very long than the anther. So this way, the plant prevents the cross self pollination. huge differences in the style, in the length, mainly in the length of style and filament to ensure cross pollination. These two plants, primula and oxalis, show heteromorphism. Next and last is self-sterility. Or self incompatibility is also called self sterility. Whenever the, in case of bisexual flower, the pollen grain from the anther of that flower comes to the stigma of the uh, gynoecium, the pollen grain is not being germinated and it is prevented, the self pollination is prevented. This way the plant ensures cross pollination. The pollen grain or the pollen comes in contact with the stigma of the same flower. It does not germinate. For example, petunia. In petunia, this kind of uh, pollination is seen. So these are the lists of both the adaptive features of self-pollinated plants and cross-pollinated flowers, self-pollinated flowers and cross-pollinated flowers. So now the pollination, after the completion of the whole topic, we can understand pollination is very much important for the fertilization to come in existence, and as well as seed formation. If there is no fertilization, the zygote will not be formed and the seed will also not be formed. So for a existence of a plant, is pollination is a very strong pillar of for that plant. So pollination is also important, as in case of cross pollination it includes various agents. It includes both biotic and abiotic agents. It maintains an ecological balance and relationship between various agents and the plants. Plant is very much dependent upon the agents for their pollination. So it makes an interrelationship between the flower and the pollinator. This way, pollination is also important for the environmental phenomenon. So this is all about today's topic, pollination.